I want to start by asking you some questions. This is about discovering your strength. And so the questions I have, they may seem, if you don't like questions, it'll bother you a little bit, but I want you to kind of better understand yourself. So the first question I have is, how many of you are morning people? Okay, for those that didn't raise your hands, thanks for being with us. Now, for those who are morning people, how many like to spend their mornings alone? Thanks for being with us. Okay. The other question I have is, how many of you like data, like input? Okay, a few of you. So for the rest of you, you're not obligated to do anything with a handout. I want to make sure everyone has one. Does everybody have a handout? For those that are into the detail, there's 11 pages, not counting the cover page. And we are obviously, you know, if you're looking at this and say, what time do we get through today? This is really some background information. I'll have you do a couple exercises. But feel free to take it, free to leave it. What I would like you to do now is if you can find a pen or pencil, and on that first sheet where you see the arrow and the number 1, if you would write your name in longhand, that means cursive, longhand, no printing. So if you would please write your name on that first line, and there's actually a purpose to this. Okay, there's two things I'd like to get accomplished today, and one is expose you to the concept of talents. What Gallup has researched, they've got a number of books out. How many are already familiar with that? Some of the Gallup books? Okay, quite a few. And then the second thing is to show you how you can apply this, how this can make a difference in your life, both personally and professionally. What I'd like you to do now is go to page 1, and you'll see 9 different items. I'm only going to ask you to look at the first 3 and plot yourself on that grid between, for morning person, not hardly would be a 1, and yes would be a 5. Just put an X by where you think you fall on that. Do the same with the second one. Do you typically get places early, or do you typically get places just in time? And then the third one, do you tend to be competitive, and you know what I'm talking about? And are you not competitive? Now, what do you think about, I said I wasn't going to go here, but just briefly, where do you think George Steinbrenner would fall on this competitive scale? Okay, so we're guessing a few people will probably be fired. Okay, with that, just take a minute at your tables and talk about where you plotted yourself. How alike or different are you from those with you? I'll just give you a minute.
On the first 3. You're similar. And I 4, 5. You have 5, 5, 4. I have 5. All the question is to see ourselves clearly. We might ask people to know us well.
I'm sorry?
I joined you guys. I'm feeling left out. I'm not going to fill out this exciting.
Okay. Well, you like to know, you know, you want to just see the big picture. Some of us just need to know, what do you want me to do next? I don't care where we're going.
You know, and I never write it.
You don't sit in the stands screaming at the referee.
All right. If I could get your attention again, please. So you probably saw some similarities with those with you and some differences. And those differences are based on our wiring, how we've been created. And on page 3, and this is to read later, some people are already going there and reading them. And that's okay. Whatever works for you, I want you to be able to walk away from here with something that'll be a benefit to you. But read that later. It talks about our wiring. I think it's pretty insightful. And a lot of people you will hear say, I'm not wired that way, that's not who I am. That may be true, but that's not an excuse to be the way you are when it's inappropriate. Now, for those of you who identified yourself as being competitive, I'm imagining that maybe playing a game of Monopoly or something, somebody said, do you always have to win? You know, so you know who you are. I did a sales class, sales managers, a leadership class, And when I asked them questions, they would race to see who could put their hand up the quickest. It's amazing. So we're wired that way, and when we use our wiring with our skills and knowledge, that becomes a strength. And that's what Gallup book, Now Discover Your Strength, is about, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. I want you to go back to the table of content, and on that second line,
I was worried about that.
you were worried about that second line, okay? So some people are looking ahead. On that second line, I'd like you to write your name again longhand, but with your opposite hand.
I don't think I could.
I can't even get my pen over there.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I'll give you about 3 more minutes. Okay, so in the interest of time, the first time it was effortless, it was easy, you didn't have to think about it. The second time took some concentration, some effort, some focus, and you probably didn't get as good a result as you did the first time. This is an example of when you work in your talent, when you work in your strength, when you work in your preferences, when you work in your learning style, it's more effective, it's easier, it doesn't take as much out of you. And this has a huge impact on whatever you do in life. And to be aware of that gives you an opportunity of kind of working your passions. And I need to tell you, I left Nike after 10 years because they were putting a hold on some of the leadership classes, and they offered me an opportunity to be an HR recruiter. And I don't want to offend anyone about recruiting, but I love to be in a classroom. And so I chose to leave a great company with great people, great product, but I need to work in stuff that I love to do. And I hope you will walk away having a better understanding of how your talents aligned with your work life and your personal life. The other thing I'd like you to do now is go to page 2. And just quickly, I'll give you the answers, but just try to answer the first few. I have 7 questions, and down below you'll see the letters A through F with the terms or the word. See if you can plug that term into the appropriate question, and then we'll go through these quickly. I'll give you about another 30 seconds, and then I'll just go through and give you the answers. Okay, excuse me. I know you haven't finished, and for some of you, that based on your wiring, that's liable to bother you, but let me go through the answers for you. The first one, a combination of how motivated, excited, interested, dedicated, committed, and so forth. That's C, engaged. Engaged employees. And Gallup has found that in the average company, there are 2 engaged employees for every 1 non-engaged employees. And later, at your leisure on page 6, you can read what's the difference between engaged, non-engaged, and actively disengaged. So the average company has 2 engaged versus 1 non-engaged. The second one, the steps of an activity, the how-tos of a role that can be transferred. And those are skills. An example would be mechanics of giving a speech. A lot of people could be taught the skills of giving a speech, but to be a Colin Powell or someone that can really draw people in, takes a talent. The third one is the inner ability, something that can be displayed in a performance versus a material possession. This is known as a strength. When you bring together the talents, the knowledge, and skills that you have, it creates a strength. Running a marathon would be an example of that. The next one is simply what you are aware of. The two kinds, and this is knowledge. Factual knowledge, such as knowing the state capitals, and then experiential knowledge, realizing that some bosses don't like feedback. Now the next one I have not been able to find out in any of the books written by Gallup, but talking to Benson Smith, who's one of the co-authors of Discover Your Sales Strength, he said that the signature themes, and I'll talk about those are made up of 8 to 20 different talents. And Gallup has organized signature themes. They've come up with 34 of them that represent about 400 talents. And I'll talk more about that. The next one is a material possession or title, and that's an advantage, like having an MBA. It's an advantage, but if you don't use it, it does not become a strength. And then the last one, based on our wiring, the 4-lane highways in your mind, those that carve your recurring patterns of thought, feeling, or behavior. This is a talent. We all have talents. We are more talented in some ways, some areas than others. And they use the example in one of their books of Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, a lot of basketball players have great skills, but you cannot teach what a Michael Jordan did on a basketball court. And you could not teach a great athlete like Michael Jordan how to play baseball if it's not a good fit. So it's not only the talent, and in the workplace, that's the idea. What are your talents, your passions, and how do they align with what you do day in and day out? The more talents that align with what you do day in and day out, the better the fit, the more energy you have, and the more productive you can be. Because we can get a lot of people, just like writing with your opposite hand, we can get people to do a good job, but it takes a lot out of them. If you want high performers, you need to match the function of the talent requirement with the talent possessed. And that's a different kind of interviewing process to hire for talent, because you can't teach a talent. That's the concept. Does everybody hear me okay? I'm hard of hearing, so I'm doing pretty good for myself, but a little bit louder. Okay, thank you. All right. Let's see. And I don't have the talent of focus, so I do need a guide. And some of you who know me know that. Will be all over the board. So let me see what I was going to say next here. Now let me. Okay, there's the wiring. Now what I'd like you to do now on page 4 are the 34 signature themes. I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to browse through those 34, and in your mind, what resonates with you? Which of those themes do you think you possess? And mark about 4 or 5 of them. And feel free to share those at your table for just 20 seconds or so. What'd you think about that? Does it anything really pop out for you personally?
Empathy always jumps out for me.
Yeah, multi-faceted.
And
using those deltas there and see.
Are those maybes? They're like
Are they any kind of order?
Yes, they are, right top to bottom.
oh wow.
She's all I want of them on. I feel like there's a couple that are like the bigger ones. Is that the competitive?
I was going to say,
I know
are you going to communicate? I was going to ask you, I'll be following that.
No, I especially like, I don't think I'm that caught up. I think like that.
Any jump out at you?
What's that?
You had some jump out at you?
Oh yeah, a few.
You know where that's right.
Competition, belief.
Oh, okay.
So where's your office right across 99? Right.
All right, if I could get your attention again, I don't want you to think you have taken the Gallup StrengthsFinder assessment. These are the 34 themes. There are 3 books back on the table that provide you an opportunity. And let me tell you what they are. And I don't work for Gallup, although they've sent me free books because I do a lot of promoting. I really think this is something insightful they've come up with. It's been over 30 years of research. They've gone into over 400 companies. They've personally interviewed 80,000 managers. What they were looking for was what makes for a high-performing manager. And then they literally surveyed millions of people. And they've got some great data. So if you like data, you're going to like this. But this book is called Now Discover Your Strengths. It's the book that came out after First Break All the Rules, where they revealed their findings. But this one is the first book that has a code in it to take an assessment. Now, Shelley, have you bought the book yet? I met with Shelley, who works here, and by the time I got through talking about this book, she said she was going to buy one. And I trust all of you, so I'll let you know where the code is. And I don't want you walking through the book rack. And the inside back cover is a code that, and then if you go to chapter 3, if you don't want to read the whole book, now I meet with a gentleman who's a project manager at Tech, and I introduced him to this book, and he bought the book, and I knew he was busy, so I said, you know, you don't have to read the whole thing. If you read chapter 3, it explains the assessment, it gives you the web page. He couldn't do it. He had to read it from front to back. You know, that's how he was wired, so that's okay. But if you don't have time to read, if you read chapter 3, it'll provide the web page, which is strengthsfinder.com. You enter the access code. You will be given a 180 question assessment, 20 seconds a question. The sample question is, do you tend to read the instructions, or do you tend to just jump in and do it, or are you neutral? And those are the kind of questions. You have 20 seconds a question because they're looking for your wiring, not to overanalyze, but what's your natural response. So this is one book, and if you buy this book, as I did, I wrote to Gallup and I said, you know, I want my wife to take the assessment, but we don't need 2 books. And they asked for my code, I sent it to them, and they sent me a code back for her. So you can do that. The other book, Discover Your Sales Strength, is, again, inside back cover. It's the same assessment, same 180 questions, but this book is all geared to sales. It tells what successful salespeople do, what their talents are, and what the talent sounds like. Now, they don't give you a second code. I don't, if you've got a spouse who happens to be a salesperson too, but this is a highly recommended if you're in sales. And Benson Smith is out of Atlanta, and he's the only person from Gallup that's been responsive and allowed me to call him and ask him the tough questions. And then the third one is a recent one called How Full Is Your Bucket? This one also, it doesn't have a code on the inside back cover, but on the inside back, I thought I was getting a disc or something, but it isn't. There is a code. How full is your bucket is a concept of do you give or do you take out of people? Do you give positive things to fill their bucket, or do you drain them? And as a gift to the buyer, they offer this code. So this is another great book. And what Gallup has found, and you'll find this on page 6, but don't go there now. There's some little quotes and tidbits in there. But what they found is when you focus on a person's strengths, you get a 29% increase in productivity. When you focus on their weakness, you get a negative return. Now think about that, how you have been managed, how people close in a relationship with you. When they're positive, what does that do to you? You know, we need to focus on our strengths because we've been created that way. And we can flourish when we create an environment like that. Okay, let me see what else I have here. Any questions about the book? Yes.
Is there anything, any difference or anything you miss out on if you, for instance, buy the CD version or the cassette version of that? Because I know it's offered in that.
I'm sorry, just a little.
If you buy a CD version of it versus the book, is there anything that you missed out on in terms of any content?
I'm not familiar with the CD version.
I saw it on, I was looking at that.
Oh, no, they give you the code, but the code can only be used one time. Let's see. On page 6, I'd like you to look at this. This is an example of the result you would get if you would have scored strategic thinking. If you scored strategic thinking, this is a description you would get. And then there's a couple examples of what strategic thinking sounds like. So just browse through there to get a sense of how that would describe you. Okay, now I'm not going to have you read the whole thing. Did anyone, when you went through and picked out of those 34, did anybody pick strategic thinking for himself? Okay. How does that description come across?
Pretty good match.
Pretty good match, okay. One of the exercises, and I have that on page, well, it's in there someplace, validation. You'll find it in the table of content. Validation. One of the exercises, when you get your results, and by the way, Richard took his and he showed me his signature themes, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the rank order of those themes. So your number 1 is your top theme, your top talent. Number 2, 3, 4, and 5. The downside of the Gallup, what I think the Gallup assessment is, they only give you your top 5. Now I've taken it 3 different times, 3 different books, so I know my 8 or 9. Some have shown up on every one. So we are all of these talents, but some are clearly, you know, where we are. And some of you have heard Bill Lattin speak here before. I think he's starting to come around to buy into this talent thing, because when I first read the book and I had a conversation with him, he's a strategic thinker. And he said anybody can be a strategic thinker, because he teaches courses on it. I said, I don't think so. You know, I think about that far out. If you're a strategic thinker, you automatically see the connection and the impact of things. Some of us can't see it. And the other thing I need to tell you is, if you have a weakness, no, I shouldn't say that. If you don't have a talent, rather than focus your attention on developing it, if it's not your talent, you need to find someone that will complement you. You know, this was the case of Hewlett and Packard. These two gentlemen had complementary talents. They both worked in their talent. And often, typical managers today will say, if you do a review, they say, here's your strengths and here's your weakness. So what do you think you're going to work on? You're going to work on weaknesses. Now, that's okay if the weakness is a knowledge or a skill, because those can be taught. If it's a talent, you've got to find either another job or someone that can complement you, or you shift some of your work so that you don't work in your weakness. They use the example of Tiger Woods, and it's a little outdated now because he's on his yacht and he's married, but his weakness was hitting out of a sand trap. Now, do you think he spent all of his time practicing that? He practiced his drives and his putting. He practiced enough sand trap to not cost him a game, but he will not win a game because of the sand trap. So think about that in terms of your work effort. Any questions so far? There will be time for questions in a few minutes, but.
I'm just going to make a comment.
Sure.
You know, in the early part of my career, when I would hire a manager to work for me, I always want to hire a junior me. And then I learned the hard way that that didn't work very well
Okay.
because my strength is I'm strategic, I'm not detail oriented, and I got in a lot of trouble because I run the accounting department and we're supposed to be detailed, but I'm a big picture thinker. I'm
Sure.
more the CFO type. So I learned the hard way by having financials come out with detailed mistakes because I didn't have an accounting manager or controller under me who had that other gift and,
Okay.
and that complementary. And so once I learned that, it helped me a lot better. It took me, a lot of mistakes, but
Sure.
So.
Okay, and if you couldn't hear, her comment was in the past she used to hire people like herself, and she learned the hard way that she really needed to get someone that complimented her. And that's you'll find more and more of that. Even in the word, when you say detailed, I've worked with a manager from Nike recently who runs a kind of an accounting function, but it's related to payroll. And whenever she hires, this is one of the applications of this thing that we'll get to, but when she hires, once they get to the finalists, she sends them a code. She buys a book, sends them a code, has them take the assessment, and sends it back. Because she wants responsibility as one of the key themes. And she wants people to be detail-oriented. And she hired someone, and then she said, she told me the story of why this person wasn't detail-oriented. And when she explained it, I said, that would have been detailed for me. I said, did you ever ask somebody what detail meant? That is now part of her interview. And she sent me 7 different definitions of detail. So here's a learning for you. Once you figure out the talent and you're looking for a certain thing, you might ask the person, define that to me, because it's probably going to be defined different than you define it. Okay, let's see. Strategic. Now I want to go to page 7. 4 keys to what great managers do. So they select for talent, and they recommend that you make that a separate part of your interview for talent. They define the right outcomes, not the steps. As long as they do it within the corporate values, then however they want to do it will best suit their talent. And then they focus on strengths, not weaknesses, manage the weaknesses out of the way, and they look for the right fit. And then their mantra is, people don't change that much. Don't waste time trying to put in what was left out. Try to draw out what was left in, and that is hard enough. And I want to give you an example. Our company has call centers, and one of the talents I believe we need in a call center is empathy. And some of you here probably have that much empathy, and some of us here may have that much empathy. And we know who we are, right? Okay. So let's suppose this is person A and B, and this is the empathy. This is our capacity based on wiring. So let's suppose, so this is person A's capacity for empathy. This is person B. This This person is performing at this level, and this person is performing at this level. Where do you think the manager is going to spend 80% of their time, A or B? B. What they found, high-performing managers spend 80% of their time where they're high performers because you've got a bigger upside. But you have to distinguish between knowledge, skills, and talent. If it's a talent, this is what you have to look at. If it's knowledge and skills, they can be trained, but there's an upper limit. And some people have a hard time accepting this concept because it's like a runner. Actually, there's a friend I know who is a consultant who teaches a fairly high-level women's soccer. And when I was kind of questioning this concept, he said he learned a long time ago that he could not give one of his soccer players more speed than they possessed. And it's like, boy, that's a no-brainer, isn't it? The best he could do is show them what got in the way of maximizing their talent, their speed, and what they could do to use all that they have. And that's the same thing emotionally. That's the same thing with strategic thinking. We all have a capacity, but if your job requires more than the capacity you have, it's probably a bad fit. So you just need to consider that. And then down below, Tammy Himes, I heard her on a tape, and pretty impressed. I'm looking for my notes here. Pretty impressed what she had to say. She resigned. She was the president of Borders. And actually, Shelley was telling me she was on her way to this store, and because of traffic or weather, she didn't quite make it, and then shortly after that, she resigned. She had 200 of her, what she called the President's Council, 200 of her best and brightest take the assessment. And what they did is, I'll give you the 5 that they have. You can jot them down there. And she did not expect all of them have the same 5, but they needed some of these. One was strategic. If you wanted to grow in Borders, you had to have strategic thinking as one of your talents. Another one was responsibility. She wanted to be able to assign a task and know that it would be taken care of. Another one is relator. You had to be able to relate to people. Another one is maximizer. And the last one is achiever. And I'll tell you, one of my #1 themes is activator. So I knocked this out pretty quickly. I'm guessing some of you have noticed that the numbers on the pages aren't aligned. There may be some typos, and that may irritate you. And if I had someone working with me on this who had complementary skills, I would have them look at it, but I didn't. So I'll just say that's not my strength. I hope you can put up with less than perfection, but that's a wiring. Okay. Now what I want to do is tell you how some of this is being applied. The first way I applied it is I used to have about 12 trainers report to me. I bought them each the book. They took the assessment. They showed me the 5 signature themes. And in chapter 6 of Now Discover Your Strengths, it says how to manage people with these strengths. So I had them look through those when we did one-on-ones. They read through, and I said, which of these things would you like to do more of? Can you even do it in this career field? And then we tried to give them that. Prior to that time, I used to ask people when I had a project, who has time for this project? And always the same person responded. Once I read the book, I said, who would like to work on this project? And I got different people to respond. And I went to the person that always responded, and I looked at her themes, and she had the theme of responsibility. She could not let something not get done. Isn't that amazing? And I can't tell you the quality of when others did what they wanted to do, it makes a difference. So that's one of the ways. And I'm going to use one of the university examples. About 4 years ago, I introduced them to the concept of talent. They were getting ready to fill a position. And what they did is they sent around these 34 themes, talents. They had people that were going to work with this person say, which ones do you think this person needs? They identified 8 of them. They developed a set of questions around those 8. When they interviewed, they asked these 8 questions besides the regular questions, and they knew who they would have hired without these questions. And they didn't hire that person. The person they hired is still there 4 years later. And here's what I'm currently doing where I work. We have a call center in our customer care. We have about 400 people on the phones. I asked the director for who are your high performers. I got the 10 top performers. I had them take the assessment. I found the ones that were most in common, and that happened to be achiever, which means every day you got to get something done or you're not satisfied with yourself. And we are now using that not in terms of hiring, but in terms of how you coach. Because it's a different coaching strategy if you've got a talent versus not a talent. Now, let me ask you maybe answer a question you may be thinking. Do your talent, yes?
I was wondering if you could repeat that statement you made on the interview. You said they asked if they had asked the question they wanted to ask, it would have picked somebody else.
Right.
But they asked these other questions.
Well, in addition to, they asked talents. And let me give you an example. If you're looking for the talent of empathy, if you were to say to someone, do you have empathy, what'd they say? Yeah. Okay, and then you've done behavioral interviewing, so you say, tell me about a time that you were empathetic. If they say, about 3 months ago, not a good. They need to say, I walked in this morning, I noticed security guard was a little down. That's empathy. Empathy is our talent is what we do automatically. So part of listening is not to the answer, but how quickly and how often. That's your natural, that's who you are. Is that okay on that?
So they hired based on that.
Oh, no, I don't want to get us in trouble legally. No, we do not hire based on that. What we're doing is saying, other things being equal, same background, same knowledge, same skills, do they have the talent? And we have not ruled out. What we've done is now we're identifying those that we think possess the talent. We're looking at data to say, does it prove out? We're looking to prove what we're looking at, regardless of whether they have the talent or not. It's a different teaching strategy, it's a different coaching strategy, because I can't get very far with somebody with a limited capacity, but I can create a freer environment for someone with a lot of capacity, because they're going to do it automatically. So it's a different strategy. You okay? We could talk offline. But let me answer the question you may be thinking. Can the talent change? And I want to tell you about, anybody remember Charles Colson? He was a special counsel to Nixon. He was jailed because of his excessive loyalty that led him to commit crimes to protect his president. Then he had a spiritual awakening. Now, has he changed? He is indeed a changed man. His talents have not changed, but his values and focus have changed. So our talents don't change. And again, if you read the wiring, and you don't have to agree with any of this stuff. I would encourage you to look into it and then decide for yourself. But when our values change, we use our talents in a different way. And I want to share, my wife Barbara is here, honey, if you don't mind, in the red. I need to tell you, we've been married 42 years. We have a great and growing relationship. But about 15 years ago, we were in crisis. We had grown apart. Divorce was an option. And at that time, Barbara turned her life over to God. Through her prayers and the prayers of people she met in the church, several months later, I also made that same decision. And since then, we have worked together on our marriage, on our relationship. What changed for me was my values. She now became very important to me, not in words, but in action. You know, the difference between intention and perception is behavior. I can talk all I want about how important family and she is, but until she sees the walk, and that's how we have changed. That's how I have changed. Same thing with our family. We have grandchildren from 2 to 20, but it makes a difference. And that difference was, for us, our values changed because of our decision for God and how we view that and how everything, work is different for me. I'm pretty outgoing. I say what I think. I always want to be respectful, but I want to be a person of integrity because I have a new set of values. So that's something to consider. What questions do you have? Let's open it up for questions because I don't want to keep you over. I appreciate you being here. Yes?
You know, this is something I struggle with when you're developing a person, let's say in the early parts of their career, and let's say to move up. You know, they're a middle-level manager now, and to move up, they need to develop like the strategic and some of those other things. And in order to be successful in their current job, they sort of have to focus on a on a less strategic and a more hands-on level. Do you think that there's like, you know, I always in my own mind think like once a person's over a certain age, like you're not going to be able to help them change that much.
Whoa.
And do you think that?
I want to use this for work because my 401k is not doing real good, but I think it would be a nice lawsuit that would help me. Okay. No, okay. So, and I didn't know you.
Say that, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So the question is, do people change? And the data says by the way, the question was, if you want to develop someone, they're doing okay where they are, but you want to move them, like strategic think is important, can they change? And she used the age word in there. The thing is, based on the data, we have those talents. But you don't have to have empathy to be good on the phones if you have another one of the talents. And that's called woo, winning others over. So it's not you either got strategic thinking or you don't. You may have networking. You may have another talent that makes up for it. That's why it's so important to discover your talents, because you may be weak in one area, but by using another one, that'll work. So I don't want you to think you only got 5, because we have a lot. We have all 34. So,
One of the key points in the book is how to manage around your weakness.
absolutely.
Once you identify them, you can start to employ tools that will help you get around
Sure.
when you're not strong.
Absolutely.
Part of the, okay.
Skip, can you repeat when somebody has a question? Can
Sure.
you repeat it so we can?
Okay, so you got this one, and then the response back here was the books explain how to work around your weaknesses. So there are ways to do it. There are tools and techniques. And then one of the books, Soar with Your Strengths, it's not back there, but one of their books talks about how to identify your talents. It has to do with a yearning to do that. It has to do with a quick learning. It has to do with the satisfaction of doing it. So one of them is, how do you find out what someone's strengths are? And there are ways you can personally discover that. Yes?
So I have one question, but it comes in like 4 or 5 parts.
Okay.
I wanted to know between your wife and yourself, who read the book first? Did that person predict what the strengths of the other might be, and how close were you?
Wow, good questions. Well, my number one theme, well, I said activator, but learning is right up there. So I read the book first. Now the difference, when our values change, I also do Myers-Briggs, I do a lot of those other things. When our values change, I started looking at our differences as complementary or as giftedness. We can use it for, for competition or for contention, or we could use it to be stronger together. So I read the book, I got the code for her, I didn't guess. Now some people, if you're wired that way, I recommend that you pick out the 5 you think you are and then you take the assessment to do that. I didn't guess, but when I found out, her number 1 is harmony. So it's been easier for me to live with her than her to live with me. Okay? One of our sons is competitive, one is adaptable, and the other one is responsible. So all different. I wish I'd have known that when they were children. I'd have treated them differently. I feel bad about that. Badly? Yes, Bernie, way in the back.
I was kind of curious, in the presidential election, do you find yourself looking at the candidates as far as a gifting thing, not just their positions, but do you also, because of your specialty, do you analyze it or give us
The question was, when I look at candidates, do I do the analyzing, do I guess? I just love interviewing. I love to do probing interviewing, and I want to know who they are. And we don't have time to go into that. I have my web page on there. I have people on a reading distribution list. About every 3 weeks, I'll send out a 1 or 2 page summary of what I'm reading. If you take the assessment, send me your 5 signature themes. I'd be happy to give you some additional information. We do need to close down to have time to do the last question, last comment.
You mentioned children. How young would you do a test like this on a child?
Most tests say they need to be at least 12 years old to be able to understand the question. So it's really a function of, can they understand the questions and understand the choices? And that's all. It's a general comment. So with that, thanks for your attention and time, and I'll turn it back over to